Welcome everybody to our inaugural South Hills Tikkun Leil Shavuot. My name is Rob Goodman. I am Director of South Hills Jewish Pittsburgh and also Director of Membership at the South Hills JCC. When Rabbi Alex and I began discussing the concept of this evening more than a year ago, we could not have imagined this particular online format. We were scheduled for this night and time at the South Hills JCC, but here we are, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have 6 of our South Hills clergy together with all of you tonight. I'd like to thank our partners, Bethel, Temple Emmanuel, the South Hills JCC, but also most of all of you for making tonight possible. For those of you who know me, I love to put dates on the calendar well in advance, so plan to be with us next year, Sunday, May 16th, 2021, Erev Sukkot, so we can all learn and celebrate together in person. So I'd like to get our Tikkun Leil Shavuot started. I'm thrilled to introduce Rabbi Amy Greenbaum from Bethel Congregation. Thank you, Rabbi Amy.
Thank you, Rob. Rob, you are muted. You are no longer spotlighted. And here we go. We're going to take that spotlight away from you. Okay, cancel the spotlight. And Rabbi Amy, we can hear you since you can hear me.
Okay.
The order we're doing tonight is not based on who we like the most or who we love the most. It is based on the order of the text.
Yeah, of my first line. So you're all
what?
Good. My first line.
I didn't know. Okay.
Do you have the shofar? Okay. Okay. Tonight, hello everyone. Chag Sameach. Tonight we are speaking, as Rabbi Alex just told you, we are speaking in the order of our text from the Tanakh, from the Bible. And by happenstance, my chosen text comes first. And perhaps it is providential, as my text sets the stage for tonight. We have been counting the days. Yes, we have been counting the days. Not the days of quarantine, but those two, but the days of the Omer, the days between the second night of Passover through tonight, Shavuot. 49 days, 7 weeks. It's a long time. So why have we been counting? What are we counting for with such anticipation? It has been all of this counting has been getting us ready for this moment, receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai. So the question is, will it live up to the hype? Now, reading the description in the Torah, specifically the book of Exodus, it most certainly does. On the third day, when it was morning, there was thunder and lightning and a heavy cloud on the mountain. And the sound of the shofar was very powerful, and the entire people that was in the camp shuddered. Moses brought forth the people from the camp toward God, and they stood at the bottom of the mountain, and all of Mount Sinai was smoking because God had descended upon it in fire, and the entire mountain shuddered exceedingly. And the sound of the shofar grew continually stronger, and Moses would speak, and God would respond to him with a voice. And there's a beautiful commentary by our great teacher Rashi, the 11th century commentator, that we came to the mountain toward God, and God came to the mountain toward us, right? From one side to the other, we came together. And God came to the mountain, actually, in the text, God came to the mountain first. God was there waiting for us, to meet with us, to be with us, and to give us this gift, the gift of the Torah. And when I say God came toward us to give us the Torah, I mean all of us. Here tonight, all of our little squares, all of our 60, 70 plus squares, we were all there. We were all there amidst the lightning and the thunder. And you might wonder how I know that. Because later in the Torah, in the book of Deuteronomy, God tells us, I make this covenant and all it contains, not with you alone, but both with those of you who are standing here this day before God and with those of you who are not here today. And in an extraordinary way, these sacred words of Torah conflate time and generations to include all Jews in the covenant. And as the Midrash explains, the souls of all the future Jews stood at Revelation at Mount Sinai. So that's how I know that all of us were there. So we were all there, right? The 600,000 plus Israelites that had been redeemed from slavery, that were bravely embarking on a new life, albeit with a whole lot of complaining. And each of us listening here tonight, we were all there. And this gift, this Torah, belongs to all of us. So tonight, we will all share the Torah through our lenses. And this is just one of the beautiful parts of Torah. It belongs to each of us. My understanding is as valid, or I should say it the other way first. Your understanding is as valid as my understanding, right? Both equally valid. The challenge is for each of us to receive the Torah into our hearts, into our minds, and into our daily lives. And we have been counting and counting. Okay, get ready. 49 nights waiting for this moment, and it is here. Let us be brave, as were our ancestors, the Israelites. I challenge us to accept this gift that God gave to each of us and to honor the thunder and the lightning and the shofar and the trembling. Let this awesome heritage into our lives, informing and enriching our days. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
And Yasher Koach, that was a good shofar blow.
Oh, it's been a little while. I wasn't really ready for shofar blowing this time of the year. So, Cantorina, you are now spotlighted, and you are going to have to unmute yourself.
Okay, we got it.
Perfect.
Okay, Rabbi, thank you for that beautiful introduction to our Torah studies, Man Matan Torah-tenu, the time of the giving of the Torah. So our first song would be one that you probably know, and you should sing from your homes as well. Torah shall come from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Praise is the one who in holiness gave the Torah to the people Israel. Ki mitzion, titzei Torah, Dvar Hashem Yerushalayim. 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 Baruch Shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael. Baruch Shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael. B'kedushato ki mitzion titzei Torah, Yash Hashem Yerushalayim. Ki mitzion titzei Torah, Dvar Hashem Yerushalayim.
Thank you. Rabbi Jessica Locketts, you are now spotlighted. You are going to be unmuted. You're going to have to do it yourself. And we can hear you.
Okay. So thank you, Rabbi Amy, for beginning the text that I'm going to do, actually. It leads in very nicely to where you left off, that I am going to be speaking about chapter 30 in Deuteronomy, verses 11 through 14, and it immediately follows what Rabbi Amy concluded with, the standing again with Moses and the reaffirming our covenant with God. We read it on Yom Kippur morning. We read it when it falls in our regular Torah cycle. And we're reminded that this covenant isn't just a covenant of old, but a covenant with each of us. But the reason why I chose the 3 verses or 4 verses following is because I find it interesting that after we're told this, that we are part of this covenant, it needs some explaining. I find it fascinating that the following verses explain a little bit more what exactly it is that we have agreed to. And I keep thinking about those who were standing with Moses in Deuteronomy may not have been those standing with him in Exodus, or there certainly were more that had joined, and perhaps it wasn't as clear what the it is that they had agreed to and that they had joined in partnership with God for. So the verses there read, "Surely this instruction which I enjoin you this day is not too baffling for you, nor is it beyond reach. It is not in the heavens that you should say, who among us can go up to the heavens and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it. Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who among us can cross to the other side of the sea and get it for us and impart it to us that we may observe it. No, the thing is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart, to observe it." So it follows that the people are told that the instruction, I guess what they have just heard Moses say is the covenant that they are reaffirming that day. It's not something beyond them. It's not something they can't understand. It's not something they don't have access to. Rather, it is a series of texts or stories, or however we want to interpret it, that is available to all. And that's why I particularly like this text, because it reminds us that this isn't a responsibility that is for some to take on behalf of others. Your teachers, your rabbis, your canners, your leaders are not going to take on the responsibility of following the rules or the laws or learning the texts, because all of us are supposed to do it and all of us can. So there's an obligation here to interact with the text and to learn it and to make sure that we're not just standing there listening to Moses tell us that we have this partnership with God, but that we have to remember that we have to act and actually be an active part of it. There is a text from Mishnah that says, "Throughout our history, none was too humble to be excluded from the mitzvah of learning, and none too prominent to be excused from it." So it's something that all of us have to partake in. Now you may wonder where suddenly it goes from instruction, right, meaning kind of the rules and the regulations and the laws, to mitzvah of learning. It's not as much of a leap as it seems if you take a look at the Hebrew. So the Hebrew tells us, "Ki ha-mitzvah hazot," translated often as "surely this instruction," but we all can hear that word mitzvah, ki ha-mitzvah hazot. So it's not just the rules and regulations, it's the obligation, the commandment, and our sages have understood this to be the mitzvah of learning all of those rules and regulations. So I kind of like that it seems a little less like we're being told what to do, and more that we are being invited to follow the mitzvah, to partake in the mitzvah, and to make it our own. A couple other things I wanted to point out here is that from this passage is where we get this idea that we can be so bold as to reinterpret the text. It seems that the idea that midrash, that being able to modernize the text in a way that keeps it relevant for each generation, comes from this idea of it not being in the heavens. That is understood as it's not from God, it's all around us. And that because of that, we can reinterpret and rephrase and re-understand. The other thing I was going to point out is just that we have to make sure that we are in charge of our own learning and that we are in charge of following this mitzvah. This last line, "This thing is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart, to observe it reminds us that it's within us. It's within our reach, and it's within us to do this, to be part of the covenant in a way that is active, in a way that builds community and keeps us connected to each other.
Thank you, Yasha Koach. Okay, Cantorina, you are highlighted. You are unmuting yourself. And we can almost hear you. Give it a second. Nope, not yet. Nope.
There we go. Maybe that'll do.
That is perfect.
Good.
Take it away.
Well, I'm going to play off the theme of your beautiful words about Deuteronomy and community. Because if you go a few chapters farther, actually toward the very, very end, the last parsha, V'zot HaBracha, has this phrase, Moses commanded us the Torah. It is the inheritance for the community of Jacob. And I'm sure everyone knows this, so I invite you to sing along from home with us. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Morasha kehilat Yaakov, Morasha kehilat Yaakov, Morasha kehilat Yaakov, Torah tziva lanu Moshe.
Thank you, Cantorina. Okay, Rabbi Aaron Meyer, you are spotlighted. You are unmuting yourself, and we can almost hear you. Not yet. You're gonna have to unmute yourself.
Try to
There you
unmute.
go.
Hello,
That's-
all. I'm so glad to be here with you this evening. When I was thinking about my favorite text that I wanted to share, it brought up a favorite memory that on my way to Thanksgiving every year, just a little bit north of here, about an hour north of Pittsburgh in Greenville, Pennsylvania, our family tradition was always to listen to Alice's Restaurant. And I'm going to guess that I'm not the only person who listens to Alice's Restaurant on the way to Thanksgiving. For indeed, when I got married, I knew that it was the right choice because Emily and her family listened to Alice's Restaurant on Thanksgiving Day. And I trust if we were to ask for a show of hands, everybody's hands would go up because listening to Alice's Restaurant is indeed part of Thanksgiving. And I'm going to be a little late to this party. I didn't realize that that story was 100% true. That is indeed why Arlo Guthrie didn't serve in Vietnam. That Obi was a real person, and indeed that story happened. And I hope by now you're trying to figure out what the hell I'm even talking about. What's the connection between Alice's Restaurant and the book of Judges in chapter 5? And for me, it's one of the greatest misconceptions about our text, right? I was thinking about the song, and when he is sitting in the psychologist's office and the psychologist says that he is fit to serve, even though he's screaming, kill, kill, right? And that is what we often think of our biblical text, particularly once we get past Torah, once we get into the writings and into the prophets, particularly in the book of Joshua, we begin to see a very militaristic text that is about conquering, that is about taking over. And I would love to destabilize that notion for you this evening. I'm going to show you a text that comes from the book of Judges. This is Judges chapter 5, to Shir Devorah, the song of Deborah, where she talks with Barak about going to war, fighting against Sisera, this army general who is giving the ancient Israelites just a doozy of a time. They're unable, the best military commanders are unable to beat Sisera, but eventually he starts to get tired. And we know this text is one of the few places where a woman is uplifted for a tremendous contribution to society. But in focusing just on Yael, we miss the best part of Judges chapter 5. In case you can't see it on your screen, Chapter 5, verse 24 reads, most blessed of women be Yael, wife of Heber the Kenite, most blessed of women in tents. That's probably a play on her profession, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, woman who lays down in tents that we get from Judges 4. He asked, Sisera asked for water. She offered him milk, maybe made him a little bit sleepy. In a princely bowl, she brought him curds. Who would be lavishing upon a stranger? Her left hand reached for a tent pin, her right for the workman's hammer. She struck Sisera, crushed his head, smashed and pierced his temple. Right? The greatest generals couldn't do it. And yet here she is, able to end his life, able to end the threat to the Israelites. At her feet he sank, lay outstretched, the most mighty of generals. At her feet he sank, lay still. Where he sank, there he lay destroyed. It's a stunning text, and it's not the best that this chapter has to offer, right? It continues that militarism. It continues that notion that even the women were fighters. And yet, when we look at the next 3 verses, we see that our text has a very different interpretation, or offers a destabilizing of what it is to go to war. The very next verse, through the window peered Sisera's mother. Behind the lattice she whined, why is his chariot so long in coming? Why so late the clatter of his wheels? Imagine, we just went from a powerful woman who is able with her bare hands to kill one of the greatest generals, to realizing that she just killed someone's son, that no matter how bad your enemy may seem, your enemy is a human being who has a mother, just like you do. The wisest of her ladies gave answer, right? Imagine Sisera's mother sitting in her chambers, and one of her attendants hears that question, hears the anguish in her voice, and says to her, they must be dividing the spoil they have found, a damsel or 2 for each man, spoil of dyed cloth for Sisera, spoil of embroidered cloths, a couple of embroidered cloths round every neck as a spoil. What are you going to say to a mother who's worried that her son isn't going to come back from war, other than something of uplift, something to try to lift her spirits until that fear that everyone holds in their heart is either proven or disproven? Our text does bring with it that militaristic element, particularly when it's talking about an entry into the land. Biblical archaeologists would tell us that military conquest probably never happened, or we'd have a lot more archaeological evidence. It opens for us a door to be able to say, well, wait a minute. What did our text, what does our highest tradition actually think about going to war? Perhaps it's nowhere near as violent as we might have originally thought.
Okay, Yasha Koach. Okay, Cantarina, we're coming back to you. We are spotlighting you, and you are unmuting yourself. And it's
There we go.
Okay.
Good. Rabbi Aaron, you inspired me to learn, I think, what is now my newest favorite song, with Deborah's song that I knew that you were going to speak about. And actually, Debbie Friedman wrote what she called Devorah's song. And if you look just one chapter before the one you spoke about, just the 3rd chapter in Judges, we see Udevorah isha neviah eshet lapidot. Deborah was a prophetess, the wife of Lapidot. She judged Israel at that time. She would sit under the date palm of Deborah, that's a different Deborah, between Ramah and Beit El on Mount Ephraim, and Bnei Yisrael would go up to her for judgment. So this song, this Debbie Friedman's Devorah's song, is a really nice upbeat song. It's mostly in English. It does have one Hebrew phrase, Uri, Uri, Dabri Shir, Uri, Uri, Dabri Shir. And I invite you to jump in at that point, or any others if you know this. we really need, I really need a whole band like percussion and piano and another guitar besides my own, and a few people playing some tambourines. So if you have like a shaker or a tambourine around where you are right now, just you can put a little percussion into it in your own house. So here is Debbie Friedman's Dvora's song. Arise, arise, Devora, arise, arise, and sing a song. Arise, arise, Devora, uri, uri, dabri shir, uri, uri, dabri shir. Devora the prophet was a judge in Israel. She sat beneath her palm tree on a hill, and the people came from everywhere just to hear her judgments, honest and fair. Devorah the prophet, Devorah a mother in Israel. Arise, arise, Devorah, arise, arise, and sing a song. Arise, arise, Devorah, uri, uri, dabri shir, uri, uri, dabri shir. Devorah the prophet was courageous, strong, and wise. Her people lived in peace for 40 years. The 12 tribes lived together as one for the first time since the world had begun. Devorah the prophet, Devorah a mother in Israel. Arise, arise, Devorah, arise, arise, and sing a song. Arise, arise, Devorah, uri, uri, dabri shir, uri, uri, dabri shir. Devorah the prophet, a woman of fire, her torch in hand. She led the Israelites to victory. Barak said, Devorah, I cannot fight unless you are standing right by my side. Devorah the prophet, Devorah a mother in Israel. Arise, arise, Devorah, arise, arise, and sing a song. Arise, arise, Devorah, uri, uri, dabri shir, uri, uri, dabri shir, uri, uri, dabri shir.
Woo.
Woo.
Okay, good job. Okay, I'm taking the spotlight, and thank you, Cantorina. It's my turn, and I'm doing the Book of Ruth. I've been really milking it for all it has this week. Chag Sameach and Good Yontiv and Happy Shavuot. Ruth chapter 1, verses 16 through 17. Vatomer Ruth, al tifkivi v'lazvech lashuv me'acharayach, ki el asher telchi elech, v'asher talini alin, aimech ami v'alayach Elohai. But Ruth replied to Naomi, do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Basher tamuti amut v'sham ekaver, ko yaseh Adonai li v'cho yasif ki hamavet yafrid beini uveinech. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus and more may the Lord do to me, if anything, but death parts me from you. Thank you, Safaria. So, Shavuot and conversion. Now, I have to apologize. Ruth is not the first convert. I hear that a lot. Ruth, the first convert. And Shavuot is the holiday of the giving of the Torah, not conversion or confirmation. But we are supposed to study all night, which is 8:30 p.m. for some of us, and others can continue on after us. And Ruth is one of the first five Megillot, in which we meet Ruth the Moabite. They say that a lot in the book of Ruth, and there's only 4 chapters. Ruth the Moabite and her mother-in-law, Naomi. And Ruth meets Boaz. And from Ruth and Boaz comes King David, and from King David will come the Messiah. But she is not the first convert. Lots of people converted before Ruth. I don't want to burst anyone's bubbles, but Abraham was not born Jewish. He converted to Judaism And he converted a lot of people since then until we get to Ruth, or we wouldn't be here today. Lots of others, but Ruth is the most famous convert to Judaism. Not a traditional conversion. No boy, it's good not to be a boy. And once upon a time, if you were part of us, you were one of us. What was conversion? No study, no rabbis, no mikvah, no certificate, and no blood. So conversion and Shavuot. Well, how about Torah and identity? We are supposed to welcome all. We are supposed to be pro-conversion. Rabbi Lockett, in her study, talked about lo bashamayim hi. It is not in heaven. The Torah is not in heaven, that someone has to go up there and bring it down to us. The Torah is supposed to be accessible. The Torah is not supposed to be exclusive. And we are commanded to welcome the convert. It is one of the Torah's 613 mitzvot, commandments. Avat hager, love the convert. Not turn away the convert 3 times. Like we saw in Sex and the City, I didn't know. Let's see if we come back. Okay, we're back. It scared me. Okay, so it's not like Sex in the City with Charlotte, where she goes to that rabbi 3 times and he slams the door in her face. That is actually a historical mistake. Once upon a time, we weren't allowed to do conversion, so they would send spies to the rabbis. They knock on the door and say, "Rabbi, will you convert me?" And if he said yes, you're dead. So you would turn away the people 3 times to make sure that they were legitimate, make sure they weren't spies, make sure they wouldn't kill you. And for some reason, that just stuck. And so Jews today sometimes think we're anti-conversion. That is not true. Rather, the Talmud, our Jewish book of law 2,000 years ago, says, Rabbi Elazar ben Padat said, the only reason that God exiled Israel among the nations was so that converts should be added to them. In Pesachim 87b. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, he's a good one, said, beloved is the convert before God more than the multitudes that stood at Mount Sinai. The convert is above those of us at Mount Sinai. A convert who comes out to convert, one stretches out a hand and brings him under the wings of the Shekhinah. Perhaps the main reason for reading the book of Ruth on Shavuot, on Saturday morning, is because it gives us such a vivid picture of the perfect, sincere convert. Shavuot is the time of the giving of our law. And when we received it, we too, like converts, pledged ourselves to accept the Torah and fulfill the 613 commandments. Another term that's popular for a convert is a Jew by choice. We should all be Jews by choice. The mitzvah of Ahavat Hager helps sensitize us to many other strangers. Ger can also mean stranger in our communities, even those who were born Jewish. Consider the powerful words of the medieval author of Sefer HaChinuch from 800 years ago. We should learn from this precious mitzvah to extend ourselves to anyone in our communities who is far from their place of origin and family. We should not simply pass them by when we discover them all alone, without those who can help them. We see that the Torah commands us to extend ourselves to someone who needs support. Some rabbis today ask a couple of questions. If Ruth were to enter our synagogue today, are we confident that she would have access to food, shelter, familial and communal relationships? Would her conversion not be called into question? Due to the importance of communal inclusion, what do we need to do to recreate the community and climate that allowed Ruth, a Moabite woman, to become integral to our people? Chag Sameach, Good Yontiv, and Happy Shavuot.
There. Am I unmuted successfully? Are we ready for my next one?
Yes, I was muted. So yes, you are perfect still.
Oh, okay, thank you. And I'm going to jump off what you have just so beautifully spoken about. I'd like to do something a little bit different for this little 2-minute interlude. I'm going to chant in the festival trope, those 2 verses that you read. And then I'd like to offer an a cappella setting of that by Lawrence Avery, actually. ותאמר רות אל תפגעי בי לעזבך לשוב מאחרייך כי אל אשר תלכי אלך ובאשר תליני אלים עמך עמי ואלוהיך אלוהי ואשר תמותי אמות ושם אקבר כל יעשה אדוני לי וכל יוסיף כי המוות יפריד ביני ובינך. And now this setting, as I said, by Lawrence Avery, a little different. אל תפגעי בי לעזבך לשוב מאחרייך כי אל אשר תלכי אלך ואשר תליני עלים עמך עמי ואלוהיך אלוהי עמך עמי ואלוהיך אלוהי ואשר תמותי אמות ושם אקבר כה יעשה אדוני לי וכה יוסיף כי המוות יפריד ביני ובינך.
Thank you, Cantorina. We are now moving to Rabbi Emily Meyer. You are now spotlighted and you are almost unmuted, but not yet. There we go.
Hello, it's so good to see everyone. Awesome. It's so good to see everyone. If you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to click off of back into the view everyone mode and just look at all the faces that are together today and how beautiful it is to see everyone's faces and to be together in this community. I am gonna play off what Rabbi Alex did and talk about one of the scrolls, but I'm going to a different holiday, and you'll forgive me for this, but it's been on my mind lately. I'm going to take us back to Sukkot and back to the book of Ecclesiastes, where we get this message that I think at first glance we want to read as a little bit hopeless, but I'm thinking that as we remember what Rabbi Jessica said and give ourselves permission to reinterpret our texts and think about how this might actually be a message of hopefulness. So Ecclesiastes starts out with really a message of a little bit of despair. It says, vanity of vanities, everything is useless, nothing endures, there's nothing new under the sun. But in chapter 3, it gives us some words that remind us of this idea of the Torah turning and turning again, and that it's not just the Torah that turns and turns again. So the first verse is, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven. And thank goodness that Cantorina is here to sing the song that you now have in your head after this presentation. But this starts out with this notion of time. I don't know about you, but for me, the last few weeks, even though we've been counting them judiciously, time has seemed a little bit off. It's easy to forget what day it is. It's easy to forget where we are in the week, in the year, in the months. The time seems a little bit strange these days. I came across this teaching from one of our favorite commentators, the Akedat Yitzchak. It says, before creation, the term time was meaningless, since it can only assume meaning in relation to events prior to and after creation. As long as there was only God, there was no need to create time. Once the process of creation had begun, we find the pivotal morning and evening, that these are points against which events can be measured, can be timed. The concepts of before and after came into existence once there had been a Bereshit, a beginning. And so even though we think of time as a little bit off these days, we can still remember that there are things that anchor us to time, counting in the Jewish holidays, counting in the week, Shabbat, that these things anchor us and can keep us moving forward and keep us hopeful about this season. But it goes on to more things that I think are relevant to this particular moment in history. A time for being born and a time for dying. A time for planting and a time for uprooting the planted. There is so much tragedy that is happening in our world, and yet there's also birth that is happening. There are also new things that are being created. There's new moments that are happening. There is a time of so much death, but there is also birth. There is also planting. And even though we might not feel like we're harvesting the work of our labor right now, that maybe these seeds that we are planting currently have importance in our world. A time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up. That Rashi connects these lines to events of military history, that there's a time on the battlefield to kill and there's a time on the battlefield to heal, a time for civilizations to be torn down and a time for civilizations to be rebuilt. And for me, this brings back that idea of is that this too shall pass, that this time will pass, that we will be entering a new phase soon, and that we will be able to rebuild and to build up our walls again. A time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing. These are connected to the funeral service, but for me, it reminds us that we have permission to feel the feelings that we are feeling. That when we're feeling sad, we don't need to compare ourselves to someone else's sadness and say, well, I'm sad, but someone else has it worse. No, we can feel sad when we do. And that we can also feel joy. And that we can say that even when others are feeling sad, there are moments of joy for me. And that's okay as well. We have permission to feel whatever it is that we are feeling. A time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones. A time for embracing and a time for shunning embraces. Well, this does ring true these days, doesn't it? A time for shunning embraces. We think of hugs and love as such an important part of how we show it, but there are other ways too. We can see the faces of our friends and our colleagues and our community here on the screen, and that too is an embrace. And this is a time for that. This is a time for that kind of embracing. A time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for distancing. That we have this opportunity to maybe discarding the things that are not working for our community, and time for keeping those traditions alive that are so important, that are so valuable. A time for changing what we're doing and imagining new ways of doing things, to embrace tradition and to embrace innovation at the same time. A time for ripping and a time for sewing, a time for silence and a time for speaking. Now Rashi connects these to the mourner, the funeral service, and that the mourner is the one who rips and sews, and that the people who are there witnessing and comforting the mourner are the ones that need to remember when to be silent and when to speak up. For me, this is a message of justice, that there are times when we can't be silent, but there are also times that we need to speak up for those who are in periods of loss. There are times that we need to speak up for those who are facing injustice, and that's our responsibility. A time for loving and a time for hating, a time for war and a time for peace. But this is the final line of this phrasing of this passage, that we end with this notion of peace. We end with this hope for a better world, a world that we can work towards, a world that we can build, a world where ultimately we will come together in peace. When we look at these all together, we can see that it's not good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, or bad, good, bad, good, bad, good. That they're all mixed up. They're all one and another and different aspects of the same concepts. And it shows us that it's not good to be born and bad to die, and good to slay and bad to heal. Like, it doesn't work that way. That each of these things has their moment. Each of these things has their time, because each of these is important in its own right. And that as we remember them today, they might teach us something today about our lives, even as they taught us in ancient times. I want to share one more story that I found as I was learning this text for this purpose, that really connected to today for me. And it's a story, it's a Midrash from Bereshit Rabbah, and it takes this text from Ecclesiastes, and it imagines applying it to Noah, because there's no time in Torah. It doesn't really matter when these texts happened in history. It says, to everything there's a season, and to every time a purpose. It refers to Noah. Because when Noah went into the ark, it is written, you shall go into the ark. And Noah went in. That was the time to enter the ark. And there was a time for Noah to leave the ark, when God said, go out. But it didn't exactly work that way. When God said, go out of the ark, Noah said, wait a minute. I'm not going to accept that order. I'm not going to go out of the ark. I'm not going to leave until you promise me that it's safe. That even though you say that I should be going out into the world, I know it's not time for me yet. I know that I need to wait, and I need to be in conversation and partnership with you. I need to be in partnership with my spiritual sense and what I know it to be right. And so I'm not going to leave this ark until I know that it is safe. And God says, okay, I'll make you that promise. I will show you that the world will be a better place, and you will be safe to go out into the world. And so I want to offer my own interpretation of these words of this text. A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven. There is time. There will be time. Take your time. A time for new beginnings and a time for endings. A time when this too shall pass. A time to feel all of our feelings. A time to reach out and a time to stay home. A time to embrace tradition and a time to embrace innovation. A time to be still and a time to speak out. A time of imperfection and an eternal hope for peace. Amen. Thank you.
Amen. Wow, that's good. Okay, Cantorina, we're coming back to you. That's a hard act to follow. Okay. I won't mute myself until we hear you.
Okay, is this good?
It's perfect.
Oh, well, thank you for the inspiration, Rabbi, and all the rabbis. So we will, this Pete Seeger version of Turn, Turn, Turn. And we'll sing a few verses of this. Certainly join in the chorus or the others as you would like. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die. A time to plant, a time to reap, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to weep. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time for every purpose under heaven. A time of war, a time of peace, a time of love, a time of hate, a time you may embrace, a time to refrain from embracing. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time for every purpose under heaven. A time to gain, a time to lose, a time to rend, a time to sow, a time to love, a time to hate, a time of peace. I swear it's not too to everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, 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 and a time for every purpose under heaven.
Thank you, Cantorina. Rob, I'm putting you up on the screen, and we are going to hear you.
Okay.
And I'm muting myself. Take it away.
I want to thank everybody for being here tonight, especially Rabbi Amy, Rabbi Jessica, Rabbi Aaron, Rabbi Alex, Rabbi Emily, and Cantorina. We've taken what's been a very unique situation for our first South Hills Tikkun Leil Shavuot, and it was just a wonderful, I think, inspirational evening for all of us. Thank you all. We miss you. We can't wait to see you, worship with you, and celebrate with you soon. Chag Shavuot Sameach, and an early Shabbat Shalom to everyone.
Thank you. We are canceling your spotlight.